I especially want to thank Mara Viveros for the kind invitation to the two of us to come to Colombia for our first time. It's been an extraordinary visit, and it has been made even more extraordinary by the incredible company of her colleagues, Ochi Coriel, and also, of course, Franklin Gil and Nancy Prada, and also the many people who have translated for us this week, especially tonight, Laia and also Lorena. So I want to thank you. And I also want to thank the many women who traveled here from many parts of Colombia, Afro-Colombian women in particular, who came from very long distances to be here this week and to be part of a discussion with us. So I thank you and I salute you for your hard work and your kindness and determination and your generosity in sharing with us the work that you have done. So thank you. Because I, of course, know that you are familiar with the work of Angela Davis, I wanted to tell you a little bit about myself and about why I'm here with you today. Angela and I have worked for many years on many different causes, particularly as abolitionists working against the prison industrial complex, but also in the university setting, in the context of Black feminism, women of color feminism, and also many, many other struggles that we think about not only in terms of our academic work, but we also try to engage in solidarity with others around the world. My own background is in literature and in African diaspora studies, and I am pleased to say that I come from a place where we now have a very substantial, highly developed, and often studied field in African diaspora studies, with many works available for us to read by Black women and men, but also by many others who were neglected in history and have been neglected by scholarship. Angela and I have been very fortunate to have received from many people here some very special gifts. And among these gifts were several books that are helping to introduce us to what is now being produced as a literature on Afro-Colombians in particular. And I salute you for doing this work. I know the work of being a pioneer is very difficult. So tonight I want to try and speak both to the academic context and to the activist context that produces Black feminism, in the hopes that in the future we will be able to cooperate even more in making this a better world for all people. I began my work, as I said, in literature, and I also work between scholarly disciplines, between, for example, anthropology, literature, and law. And I mention this, even though I know that not everyone here is an academic or a student, because the very idea of crossing between these established disciplines, the disciplines that may only be 150 years old, is often a very controversial thing in the university. It is often one of the very things that discredits and serves to make it difficult to come from a field where you necessarily must make those crossings. When we are in feminist studies, the department where I come from, it is necessary that I look at history, at literature, at sociology, at anthropology, at law, at many of their works. And of course, also, I must look at the text that is unwritten, at the things that either I know or I can learn from others. At the experiences that people have had, that they may not have had the chance to write, but that can become a new subject in this new context. But universities are not always so welcoming of these new fields. And one way they make it difficult for us to do our work is by holding on to the boundaries between fields. So maybe it will help me if I know a little bit about you in the audience today, since it's a larger audience than we normally have at academic lectures in the United States. How many of you are students? Raise your hands. Wonderful, wonderful, thank you. And how many of you are faculty here or at other universities in Colombia? Some, yes. Wonderful. And how many of you are activists? Whether you are faculty or students also, but primarily as activists? Wonderful. One of the things that I am thrilled about this week is that we are together in these rooms. We are not separated as faculty or students from activists. And as Angela mentioned last night, we were fortunate enough even to spend a few moments speaking with women at the local district jail. And in that way, I feel connected to many, many different layers of society here. Okay. We've been discussing many of these issues during this week's seminar. And I want to talk a little bit from my own work on prisons and popular culture. I study the prison not only in the ways that we commonly know that people have studied the prisons for the last years of their existence, through psychology or sociology or through documentary, but I also study popular culture about prisons. One of the reasons why I want to do this is because so much of the understanding that I believe we bring to bear in our political discussions about prisons has to do with what we have heard or seen or watched in our culture, in our everyday culture, often on TV or in films or in books. And in many ways, that knowledge comes to form the major ideological ground in making decisions about what should happen with the future of the prison. And as an abolitionist, I think you already know, for those of you who were here last night, that I believe, as Angela expressed, in a future without prisons. But the question is how we will get there. The question of how we will get rid of prisons is somewhat different than the one that 19th century abolitionists used. It is different because, in part, one of the problems of the prison is that it uses the activity of the individual against that individual, even when they are being persecuted as a member of a group. What I mean is that when an individual is imprisoned, they are imprisoned as the result, ostensibly, of a fair judicial process. That is, a process which has determined that they are guilty of something. See? ¿Es mejor? A process that has determined that they are guilty of an act. One of the complicated things to make clear, even when one is hearing statistics about how many black people are in prison, is we have to think about how they arrive there. If I am an activist, or if I am a scholar, and if I am telling you that there is a very large chance that a black man in the United States, as Angela mentioned last night, an over 30% chance that he will land in prison. One problem in you agreeing with me to end prisons and to end the use of prisons in this way is for you to understand that maybe there's a chance that that black man is not guilty of something himself. Is everyone following me? So it is different than the struggle to end slavery, which was a struggle where it was obvious to many, many people that the reason one became a slave had nothing to do with their individual acts. One was born into slavery. But eradicating the prison-industrial complex has another additional difficult ideological component. Because the ideas that help to fortify the prison-industrial complex include the idea that even if some people are sent to prison falsely, or even if there are such things as political prisoners, the vast majority of people who are in prison are bad people. So I hope you will join me in trying to think about how it is that the idea that those inside prisons are bad people might be preventing us from seeing what else we might do in society without prisons. As Angela mentioned last night, in response to some of the questions about what an abolitionist would suggest, there are many aspects of society that would need to change in order to decrease the use of imprisonment as a supposed solution. But I wanted to address, because the title of my remarks tonight is Conceptual Issues in Black Feminism, what this has to do with Black feminism. I know that many of you, perhaps, do not identify as feminists or even as Black feminists. And it might surprise you to learn that that is not of primary importance to me. What is of primary importance is for me to express to you the robust, vibrant, and important heritage of Black feminism that can, hopefully, open a world of thinking about such questions of the prison in a different way. As I mentioned, I teach in the Department of Feminist Studies, but in that department, we don't only study women's issues or women, but we study the world from a feminist perspective. It is not important to us whether or not the people with whom we do this work understand themselves as feminists and identify themselves as such. What is important is the work that they do. There are actually many Black feminisms, and I think we understand that by virtue of being a Black woman, there is no guarantee that one will take a progressive position on racial causes, on gender causes, or on any other cause that might emerge. It is one of our most urgent and pressing contemporary issues. How could we address the contradiction? How can we address the contradiction that we have increasingly, though small, numbers of Black people in positions of power? But this does not necessarily change the perspective we have or the role the state is playing in the majority of our lives. So I want to focus, even though there are many Black feminisms, on the kind that I feel most in solidarity with. And that is a Black feminism that considers the state. It considers the state not as something over there, or not merely in a limited sense as the government, but it considers the state in terms of the ideologies that people also have. It considers our interior lives. It considers the impressions that form the background before we come to our academic knowledges, and form the background before we also engage in activism.